Hi and welcome to a new series of Azure webinars brought to you by the Cloud Solution Architects here at Ingram Micro Cloud. My name is Nathan Sweeney. Today I'm joined by Nigel Mullins and we'll be taking you through Windows Virtual Desktop. Today's agenda will cover off secure remote working with Windows Virtual Desktop, which is top of mind for lots of CEOs or MDs during this current pandemic. We will be discussing the challenges faced during these uncertain times, and we will run through the architecture of WVD service and also have a look at an enterprise architecture for WVD. We have a couple of short demos which Nigel will go through, showing the end user experience in creating a host pools, as well as a couple of slides looking at security and a bit of a sneak preview into a couple of new features that will be available in the next release, which will be later this year. Last year, Microsoft made some huge improvements for Windows Virtual Desktop, with remote working becoming the norm nowadays and Microsoft WVD service enabling remote working for thousands of customers around the world. The new GUI enables partners to quickly deploy Windows 10 multi-session host pools in minutes. This is an overview of the WVD usage over the last year since Microsoft released the service. The WVD optimizations on the slide have been added in the last year due to the dramatic increase in the service. The service metadata will be available in more regions, starting with Europe this year. Microsoft also used WVD to enable remote engineering and support remote internships and empower new employees to onboard prior to receiving their new laptops. When we talk to partners about moving to the cloud, there are a few things that come up and are top of the mind in almost every conversation we have. The first is how we can ensure the users can stay productive and have the same experience and ability to do their work as they're currently doing every day. Secondly, security and compliance are always top of mind for our partners, and we have a slide that touches on that shortly. The other thing that partners talk about is how to scale up and scale down as needed, manage the network utilization and their domain controller usage and costs. WVD is designed to address all of these needs. To address productivity, there are clients for the WVD service on every major client platform, Windows, Mac, Linux, etc., which gives them a rich Windows 10 client. Microsoft have focused on a quick start to deploy WVD using an Azure DevOps pipeline to get the resources up and running. That can be found at https://aka.ms/WVD quick start. There is a rich ecosystem of partners to help customers migrate from on-prem VDI and modernize the deployment in the process. Here's a quick look at that rich ecosystem of partners. This slide has a few of the partners that work with Microsoft and Windows Virtual Desktop. The majority of systems integrators around the world have started to deploy WVD on behalf of their customers. Many of them are building specific practices around the service, which is driven by customer interest and momentum. There are ISVs bringing their expertise into the VDI space into WVD. You'll notice Nerdio on there, who Ingram Micro have also partnered with. And of course, there are hardware partners. iGel was the first to market about a year ago with a Linux-based client for WVD. A lot of partners ask us how they can use the familiar tools they already have for Citrix and VMware in the move to WVD. Citrix and VMware are two of Microsoft's strongest partners, and with the service and Microsoft have seen that customers recognize the value of having these partners hosting their services on Azure. Microsoft have also built out their own control plane, which was driven by customer demand for a first-party solution where customers want to simplify and reduce cost. With Windows Virtual Desktop, you get access to a full Windows 10 desktop. You can publish applications, whether they are line of business applications or third-party apps, and access them remotely. You focus on what is specific to your organization's deployment, so you set up your policies, virtual machines, network configuration, and users that you want to focus on. You don't need to spend any time worrying about the underlying infrastructure. such as connection brokers or maintaining servers, virtual machines to power the service. Microsoft handles the complexity of running these services in the cloud so you can focus on what your organization needs for your deployment. Traditional public cloud services offer VDI solutions that map a single user to a single virtual machine. This may be appropriate for some of your customers, but a typical virtualization environment has a mixture of multi-user and single-user host pools. The primary reason for multi-user is to reduce cost and management overhead. We all know that a typical task or office worker rarely consumes the full resources of their desktop. If you were to provision each user at their peak needs, you would be paying a lot for resources that you are currently not using, the white space which is shown in the images here. Now, if we consider a real-world scenario where I have 24 of these task workers and I was to provision VDI instances in the cloud, inefficient use of resources start to create a significant gap between what I am paying for and what I'm using. In this case, I would require 48 vCPUs and 96 gig of RAM. Now we know the typical virtualization deployments have pools of identical virtual machines that host a large number of users. And you, as the IT admin, want control of how users are allocated across those virtual machine pools. WVD provides two core load balancing methods to provision users to virtual machine host pools. The first and default mode is breadth mode, which evenly allocates users across the available virtual machines in a host pool. This helps ensure that users are getting the maximum amount of resources available to them. WVD also supports depth mode, which allocates users to a single virtual machine before allocating users to the next virtual machine. This mode allows you to better control your variable costs as you can spin up additional virtual machines as needed using the WVD scaling tools. The service will dynamically adjust user allocation based on the amount of virtual machines available. We will provide a few scaling templates you can use, or you can modify them to create your own scaling algorithms to meet your needs of your business. This is the high-level architecture of WVD, and as you can see on the right-hand side, starting at the top, Microsoft will manage the web access, diagnostics, gateway, management, broker, and load balancing. This is the PaaS service as mentioned earlier. You would then control and decide on such things as what operating system, applications, and how you want to access the environment. Microsoft would then manage the underlying virtualization of that IaaS infrastructure, such as the compute, storage, and network. This has to be designed to your business specifications, so you will have to have input on design considerations, such as IP ranges and network addressing schemes. This diagram shows a typical architectural setup for an enterprise Windows Virtual Desktop deployment. The application endpoints are in the customer's on-premises network. ExpressRoute extends the on-prem network to the Azure Cloud, and Azure AD Connect integrates the customer's Active Directory domain services with Azure Active Directory. The Windows Virtual Desktop control plane handles the web access, gateway, broker, diagnostics, and extensibility components like REST APIs. The customer manages ADDS, Azure Active Directory Domain Services, and Azure AD, Active Directory, Azure Subscriptions, Virtual Networks, Azure Files or Azure NetApp Files, and the Windows Virtual Desktop host pools and workspaces. To increase capacity, the customer uses two Azure subscriptions in a hub-spoke architecture and connects them via VNet peering, virtual network peering. Nigel will now take you through what the WVD service looks like from an end user perspective. We have 3 host pools set up in a testbed environment, one with a Windows 10 multi-session desktop, which has been assigned to all 3 users. We are also publishing some apps from this host pool, which has been assigned to users 2 and 3. There is a host pool which contains a personal desktop, which has been assigned to user 1. This virtual machine has Windows 10 single session. And finally, a host pool with a Windows 7 machine, which has been assigned to user 1. Let's take a look at what that looks like for the 3 users when they subscribe to the service. Nigel, over to you.
So here I am logged into the Azure portal, and as you can see, I have pinned the Windows Virtual Desktop tile to my dashboard. If I go into the tile, I'll be presented with the Windows Virtual Desktop 2020 Spring Update management plane. And from here, you can see the management capabilities. So I can create host pools, application groups, workspaces, and users. And now the whole solution is managed from here. So the three host pools that I've got set up, I've just named them Ingram Micro Cloud Proof of Concept, Host Pool 1, 2, and 3. I can see the resource group that they're in, the location of the metadata, my subscription, the host pool type. So this is pooled, these are personal. Pooled is for lots of users to log on to a multi-session operating system like Windows 10. The load balancing type for my host pool, and this one is breadth first, which means each user will log on to the next host in the host pool. And you can see I've got two application groups in there. One application group is a full desktop. The other application group is a bunch of applications that are being published. So let's have a quick look at what that looks like. So this is my Windows 10 multi-session host pool. I've got two session hosts in there. These are the session hosts. They're on and available. I've got no active sessions, no users assigned, and some information about the individual session hosts. The application groups, so this is the desktop application group, which is presenting my Windows 10 multi-session desktop to my 3 users. And this is the application group that is publishing my applications, and these are the applications that are being published. To assign users to these application groups, you can see from the application group that it's assigned to a workspace. So my host pool 1 is in workspace 1, host pool 2 is in workspace 2, and so on. To assign users to these services, so for the full desktop, if I want to assign users to my application group, my desktop application group, which is my full desktop, I can just go into here, assignments, or here, and just add the users from Azure Active Directory. You can see I've added these users 1, 2, and 3 in there. And in the applications, I've assigned 2 users to the applications, the same format of assigning users. And these users are from my on-prem Active Directory, been synchronized into Azure Active Directory. So that's the first host pool. It contains a full desktop and some applications in 2 separate application groups. Host pool 2 contains a personal desktop. You can have pooled or personal host pools. So in here is a full desktop assigned to one single user. So the application again is a session desktop. It's just a personal desktop for a single user. The assignments, I can assign users from within this management blade. And the same for my third host pool. This is a Windows 7 virtual machine, which I can assign to users in the same way. You can see that from this desktop application group, I've just assigned a single user. So user 1 will see all 3 workspaces, host pools, and we'll be able to have access to all of the services, where users 2 and 3 have access to host pool 2 and just host pool 1. So let's have a look at what that looks like for users logging into the service. If you're signing into Windows Virtual Desktop using Windows, you can use either a desktop client, which you can download from the Microsoft Docs, and I'll show you where that is in a later slide, or you can use the web client. This is the Windows Virtual Desktop client, and I'll show you user 1 logging in or subscribing to the service using this, and users 2 and 3 using different browsers to access my host pool. So for user 1, they simply select Add, select Workspaces, and enter this URL to the feed discovery. They're then going to log in with their on-prem credentials, which have been synchronized to Azure Active Directory. So this is user 1 in my Azure Active Directory. And if you remember, user 1 has access to all 3 host pools, so should see everything that I'm publishing in different workspaces. So this is Workspace 1. It has the published apps under full desktop, which is the Windows 10 multi-session. Hostpool 2 inside Workspace 2, which has a personal desktop, and Hostpool 3 inside Workspace 3, which has a Windows 7 desktop. You can minimize these, change the name of them, purely for management capabilities of how you want to lay out your infrastructure for your users. So to log on to the Windows 10 multi-session desktop for my user 1, I simply click on the icon and it's going to take me to a connect screen. Now with this new remote desktop client, you have the capability to add your users up front. You can see I can just add the account, put the credentials in, and then connect to save me logging on lots of times. So this is user 1 logging in. FSLogix is configured, his profile is configured, and he has a Windows 10 full desktop. So while he's doing that, let me pull up the two browsers and log in with users 2 and 3 and to the same host pool and see what that looks like. So you can see user 1 logged in, Teams is opened, there's a full desktop, pretty much the same as he would have if he was in the office, all his apps, everything that he's used to. You can see which machine he's logged onto, which of the two session hosts in my host pool. So he's logged onto VM0. So let's log on to Windows Virtual Desktop using the web client with user 2. So for the web client, it's a slightly different address. Same process, he's going to subscribe to the service and then he will see what resources have been made available for him. So user 2 logging in. And as you can see, user 2 only sees Workspace 1, whereas user 1 sees Workspace 2 and 3, which we assigned in the portal in the solution. So for user 2 to access the multi-session desktop, same process, simply click the icon and log on with your on-prem credentials. So user 2. And you'll notice straight away that at the top of the browser there's a new tab. And this new tab is for my Windows 10 multi-session session. FSLogix being configured, my profile getting configured, and me logging onto my Windows 10 session. So that's 2 users logged on to my Windows 10 session. So again, you can see different tabs for the different resources. If I open WordPad, it'll be a new tab. And there's a little bit of additional functionality in the desktop client. So for example, there's no refresh here. So if I published a new application and assigned it to user 2, I'd have to refresh the browser. In the desktop client, I can use this refresh and it will appear almost immediately, any amendments that I make. So I've got my 2 users logged in. Here's user 1 on Windows 10, here's user 2 on Windows 10. And you can see they've both got access to the same apps, it's the same image, and they're both happily working away on different session hosts. So because this host pool was configured using the default load balancing method, which is breadth first, this user should now be on a different host, and you can see that he's connected to VM1 and this user is connected to VM0. Okay, so that's both users logged on. So if I open another browser and log on as user 3, the same web address, subscribe as user 3, user 3 logging on. And you'll see user 3 doesn't have access to the application group, which is in Hostpool 1. He just sees the full desktop. So user 2 can see the apps, but user 3 just sees the full desktop. So if I log on as user 3, this is the third user logging into my session hosts with my on-prem credentials. Password in. So he also is going to log on to the Windows 10 multi-session operating system and have his full desktop in a separate tab as well, as you can see. So there's his one resource available to him. And this is the, you can see Teams, involved in the Teams chat straight away because it's installed on the session hosts. And if you look at which machine this user is on, it should hit the next one. So if the last one was 1, this guy should be back on 0 because I've only got 2 session hosts. He's on 1, okay. So I've got 2 users on VM1, 1 user on VM0, load balanced across the 2, and they'll just keep switching over. So I can see now if I look at the users, I can see I've got users 2 and 3 on this machine. My performance is still reasonable, 5% of my CPU, half my memory is being used, but I've got 3 users all logged on to the same host pool. And they can all obviously Teams chat between each other and do all the normal things that you would expect them to do if they're in the office. So remote working capabilities, Windows 10 multi-session desktops in the cloud from Azure.
Thanks for taking us through that, Nigel. Really insightful. Now let's assume we have tested the solution in the proof of concept lab or testbed, and we now want to deploy another host pool that will have 2 session hosts to handle 50 or so users. Nigel, back over to you.
Creating host pools in the 2020 Spring Update of Windows Virtual Desktop is really straightforward. Let's walk through creating a new host pool for my 50 users. So if I go into host pools and select add to add a new host pool, I just need to fill in some basic information, then some information about the virtual machines that will form part of the host pool, a workspace, tags, review and create. So the first thing I need is a resource group. I'll use the existing resource group where the rest of my host pools and resources are. Give the host pool a name, and I want to keep the same naming convention. So I've got 1, 2 and 3, so I'm just going to use 4, host pool 04. Location of the metadata, which is fine in East US. This is not a validation environment, and I want a pooled host pool. Once I select pooled, it's going to ask me the amount of users that can log on to each session, the maximum amount of users before the next user will be directed to the next session host in the pool, and then the default load balancing algorithm. Remember, I've got breadth first and depth first, so I'm just going to leave the breadth first default. Once I've completed that basic information, I just need to add some information about the virtual machines in the host pool. So firstly, the location of the virtual machines, and they're going to be in the UK South where my infrastructure resides. And then the size of the virtual machine. So for the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to use B4MS, which has got 4 virtual CPUs, 16 gig of RAM, 8 data disks, 2800 IOPS. I've got temporary storage of 32 gig, and it's about 100 quid a month, just over. So that should be fine for my 50 users. Let's just create 2 for the purpose of this. And then I can give my virtual machines a prefix in order to identify them. So let's say this is going to be for my production environment, so WVD prod-VM. So I'll have VM 0 and 1 for my 2 session hosts. Then the image. So this is going to be a gallery image, and it can be gallery or blob. Where does the image reside? So we're using a gallery image, and I'm going to use the Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session version 2004, which is optimized for Office 365. I can select the type of disk, whether I want standard SSDs, premium SSDs, or standard hard drives. And then the network has been picked up from the location of my infrastructure. And then public IPs. So I don't need any public IPs open. 3389 is closed in this solution. So there's no inbound ports. I'm using a basic NSG, network security group, which is where the rules are applied for my networking. So 3389 is disallowed in the NSG. And then I can specify the domain that these virtual machines are going to join. And because remember, these session hosts need to be part of a domain. So my domain happens to be called onprem.com. I can specify an additional OU if I want to put them in a specific OU in my Active Directory, which I don't. And then I just need the person that's going to join the machines to the domain, who has permissions to join these machines to the domain. So this is my user who has the permissions to join a machine to the domain. So I just complete that. And it's important you get this correct, or the deployment will fail on this particular section, trying to join the machine to the domain. So then we just need to register the desktop application group, which will be created for me inside a workspace. So I've got workspace 1, 2, and 3. So it makes sense to create a fourth workspace 04. Okay, so once I've filled in all that information, I'm not using tags. Tags are good for reporting purposes if you want to report on a specific department or location or region. So then I go ahead and validate the deployment. If it validates okay, I can just hit create and it'll go off and create these two B4MS virtual machines inside a Hostpool for my users to log on to. So while that's creating, we can just have a quick look at what's being created. It shouldn't take long to create because there are only two virtual machines and they're being built simultaneously. I've got my domain that they're going to join up and running here. The machines are going to land in this OU once they've been created. And I'll then be able to assign users access to the desktop application group, and we can have a look at what it looks like for one of those users to log on to my new Hostpool. So I'll just pause the video until this is completed, and we'll come back and have a look at what's been created. Okay, so the deployment has completed. I can now see I've got an additional Hostpool 04. It's in the same resource group, same location, subscription. It's a pooled Hostpool, the default breadth first load balancing, and one application group, which should be my two B4MS session hosts. So if I go into the Hostpool, I can see I've got standard B4MS, two session hosts, both available. Have a quick look at those. There's the two session hosts, my prod VM0 and prod VM1, both available inside my desktop application group. So this hasn't been assigned to anybody yet. So if I want to assign somebody to the desktop application group, I go into the application group, click on assignment, and let's just add WVD user 1 using my Azure AD. Add user 1. Okay, so user 1 now has access to my new Hostpool. Just go back to the Hostpool itself, see the session hosts. Okay, so let's log in with user 1 and have a quick look what he now sees. So I'll just open a new in private, go to RD Web and log in with user 1. Password in. Hopefully user 1 now sees the new Hostpool in workspace 04. There we go. So you can see it's just got the default desktop for now. Name, which I can obviously change, we've seen that. If I go into the Hostpool properties, Give it a friendly name of WVD Prod, for example. That's updated, and now my user should be able to pick up that update by refreshing his browser. It's not updated yet. The name of the desktop will update. My user can just click that, log in as normal. Let's do that and log in with his on-prem credentials because single sign-in is configured for Azure Active Directory users. So this is on-prem user 1. Remember, in a browser, users get a new tab to log into the desktop. So just confirm that it's logged into the new session host, which has just literally been created. So again, this is a multi-session operating system, Windows 10 multi-session for VDI. You can see there, and you can see it's on Prod VM1, which we'll be able to see and confirm from the Hostpool. You can see now we've got one active session. If we go into the session host on Prod VM1, we should see that active session. And user logged in, WVD user 1. So that's how to create a Hostpool really quickly for your users in your on-prem environment to be able to access Windows Virtual Desktop and start working remotely.
On the screen in front of you, there are currently 4 links which will get you quickly up to speed with Windows Virtual Desktop. The first link is to the landing page for WVD, where you'll see an overview of the service, links to all areas of the service, including the overview. The tutorial is what was used to create the host pools and has how-tos for all the features, including setting up user profile containers and FS logic and so on. Finally, you will need to feed discovery URL in order to connect to the service, which you can get from the Connect with the Windows Desktop Client link. Microsoft has focused on 3 dimensions to how you can reduce costs and spend. You can make huge savings on the underlying Azure infrastructure, which is already an efficient, scalable compute, storage, and network cloud infrastructure that you can build on. Azure also provides tools to let you manage the utilization of that infrastructure, whether it's scaling up or down, auto-shutting down virtual machines, or using Windows 10 multi-session in WVD, which lets you have scalability of Windows Server Sessions hosts with a user's experience you would get from Windows 10 Enterprise clients. You can save on licensing because access to WVD is included in your M365A3 or A5 or E3 or E5 licenses or Business Premium, which saves on RDS CALs. The TCO goes down because you don't have to spend your IT department's energy on looking at gateways, brokers, or infrastructure virtual machines, or patching those virtual machines, or doing any of the work to keep that infrastructure up and running. So we're on the same page. The underlying infrastructure is managed by Microsoft. You only need to focus on the users, apps, and images that you want deployed. You can use Azure Advisor to find best practices, deploy the solution using the Azure portal or WVD Quick Start template for an automated deployment. You can quickly add or remove additional session hosts and use built-in Azure Monitor and Log Analytics to monitor your environment. Microsoft have invested heavily in how the service can work better for partners that are scaling up over the last year. Let me walk you through some of these investments. The first biggest investment has been around security and compliance. Microsoft have invested in certifications in the security space, including ISO, PCI, HIPAA, and so on, which makes it possible to use Windows Virtual Desktop in sectors that are more heavily regulated and might need that extra layer of compliance. Diving deeper into security. Because WVD is part of the overall Azure platform, it benefits from the comprehensive security capabilities that Azure has to offer. These are capabilities that are tightly integrated and they are designed to work well together. This means that organizations can take a 360-degree view of the security of their WVD deployment in Azure. So, looking across identity, the session hosts, the apps you are running in your sessions or virtual machines, the infrastructure you run on, and then your network and data layers. Being able to look at all of those pieces and getting a holistic view and a sense of confidence across all of them. On the identity front, things like conditional access and MFA give you extra confidence in situations where, for example, a username and password becomes compromised. Attackers will still be denied access to your environment. Defender ATP includes Microsoft Next Generation AV protection on the session host, which is enabled by default. You can then set up policies on the same session hosts to manage those things like security updates, to control device redirection, set time limits for auto log-off and disconnects, and so on. And generally, to make sure nothing is left open when it should be shut down. With App Locker and application control, you have the ability to control all the apps that are running in the virtual machines. So you have confidence over what code is going to run in the virtual machine and what things they have access to as well. At the infrastructure level between Azure Security Center and the Secure Score, you will get a scan of your complete subscription, and that will give you insights and feedback on how to stay secure based on your specifics of your deployment. Microsoft have also published a ton of best practices on how to secure your services on Azure, which you can follow to ensure you are getting the most out of your deployment. At the network layer, there are things like Reverse Connect, which allows you to operate your virtual machines without having to open inbound ports. You can also use things like service tags and Azure Firewall to manage traffic in and out of the deployment at the network layer. And then at the data layer, MIP is a great way to protect data if it leaves your deployment. What this does is puts a layer around the data so it protects it in a way that can't be viewed without the correct credentials. Then Azure Disk Encryption goes hand in hand with BitLocker to keep all of your data encrypted inside the virtual machine itself. So as you can see, a lot of work has been done to ensure you can secure your deployment and get it working in the right way. The next area that Microsoft have invested in is around usability. One of the top asks for Microsoft last year was the ability to have a point-and-click interface for administering your WVD deployment. And as you saw earlier in the webinar, how easy it is to actually get that up and running for your customers. Another new feature which came live last year was AV redirection with Microsoft Teams. So let's show you how that works. Traditionally, when you are making a real-time communications connection in WVD, what happens is the traffic of the call is routed between the virtual machines. So with AV redirection, a point-to-point connection is created between the two endpoints using WebRTC. And this is a more efficient way of connecting two endpoints as it creates a much better user experience for the people on the call. They get better latency and a more natural calling experience. Above and beyond the improved user experience, you also get improved performance as well. So your utilization in your virtual machine goes down so you can get a better density in order to reduce costs. So in order to give you a view of that, this slide just has two screenshots of Task Manager, one running without AV redirection and one running with the Teams optimization that takes advantage of AV redirection. And as you can see, there's a reduction from 12% CPU usage to 1.5% CPU usage, which is a massive reduction that goes right down to the virtual machine density that you're able to pack into your virtual machine, which is huge cost saving if you have users doing a lot of calling and collaboration work within Teams. Just before we wrap up this webinar, I would like to give you a glimpse of the upcoming cost-saving feature, Start VM on Connect. This will allow you to leave your session host powered down to save on costs, and when your users need to work with session hosts, they'll power up as soon as the user connects. Microsoft say we can expect this feature in the next year. So thanks everyone for joining the webinar today. We hope that you've found it useful. If you want to reach out to us, our details are on the screen, and we'll also be holding a Q&A session straight after this. So I'm just going to go and dial into that, and I'll see you shortly.
Hi all, Nigel here. I hope you found that useful. Thanks, Nathan, for your input on that. Can you just, I'm not sure if everybody can hear me actually. Can someone just confirm in the chat if you can hear me talking? I'll just run through some questions that we have. I think you should be able to hear me. Oh, thanks, John. So, like I say, thanks for attending. Thanks for taking the time out of your day today. Thanks, Brad and Sean, for confirming. So, with that webinar wrapping up, I just wanted to run through, check with any of you guys if anyone's got any questions. If you do have any questions, just start firing them into the chat, and I'll go through them from top to bottom, or the other way around. We're getting a lot of traction at the moment. Windows Virtual Desktop with remote working lately is really, it's gaining a lot of traction. A lot of our partners are taking up Windows Virtual Desktop. Microsoft have increased their usage of the service over 30% of late. It really is getting a lot of traction with the latest work from home capabilities. We're in lockdown 3 now, so remote working is here to stay, and this solution from Microsoft, like I say, it's really getting a lot of traction. So there's a couple of glitches in the webinar that I just want to apologise for. I think we had a duplicate slide when I was building out the live Hostpool, and essentially that was just going to show another user logging onto a new Hostpool, which is the same as logging onto the ones we already had set up, to be fair. But I just wanted to run through what it would look like to create the Hostpool from scratch rather than showing you users logging into a pre-existing. And the sound as well, I'm aware that there are some sound issues with the webinar, so we'll definitely look to address those for the next follow-up webinar and or future webinars. So thanks for that update, Martin. Right, so on to any questions. We did have a couple of questions, not many, so if you do have any, like I say, just ping them into the chat. I'm happy to answer any question you have around Windows Virtual Desktop. But remember as well, you can always reach out to us directly if you have any queries or anything you want to know specifically around the service. Okay, we had a couple of errors at the beginning of the webinar. I think we got those sorted out for Saladin. Apologies there, Saladin. I'm glad you were able to continue watching the webinar. And Brad, a question around, got a question from Brad around Teams. And the question is, how does Microsoft Teams behave with Windows Virtual Desktop
with regards to video calls, is it best to keep this application local still? And I kind of touched on that with one of the slides on the new capability in Teams, one of the optimizations, which is AV redirect. So to redirect the audio and use that point-to-point connection between the two endpoints, rather than essentially going from user to user rather than from VM to VM, which is a lot smoother, cleaner way of collaborating in a virtual desktop environment. So what you would do, you would essentially build your Windows virtual desktop host pool similar to the host pools that we watched in the webinar. You just build a normal host pool, and then what you would do, you would RDP onto those session hosts that you've built, install Teams in a per machine install, which is just a different MSI. It's really quick to install it. So you install Teams on your session host, and then in the host pool in Azure, when you look at the host pool properties, there's an option to enable AV redirect, which is taking advantage of that Teams capability. So obviously, because it's a Microsoft tool, Teams, Windows Virtual Desktop, it's all Microsoft, so they're just basically pulling all capabilities into the cloud solution. So I hope that answers that for you, Brad. Let's see if you've got any more questions. Ben, can we share the slides? Yeah, so at the end of our webinars, what we tend to do, or what we always do, is upload the content to our content hub, and we would share, so we'll email all of the attendees of the webinar with links to our content hub, where this content will be also uploaded for you to watch, on demand, basically. And so yeah, we'll definitely be sharing all the content, and like I say, all our previous webinars, if you haven't seen any of them before, and there's quite a few on Windows Virtual Desktop now on our content hub. So like I say, we'll be sharing the link to our content hub if you don't have that, and we'll direct you to our cloud webinars for the IaaS team on our content hub. So I'm not seeing any more questions, which is good. It means that the webinar went well and you fully understand how the solution works. I hope that it's something that you can take advantage of. And if it is, I'm just going to push our contact details back to the slide. So like I say, please do reach out. We're here to support you guys on your cloud journey. Anything in Azure, myself and Nathan will be happy to get straight back to you and answer any queries you have and help you on your cloud journey. So unless I see any more questions coming in, I'm going to hang on for another minute in case I see any questions coming in. I just have some confirmations that you can hear me. So yeah, nothing else as yet, but I'm just going to hold on for a minute, see if you've got anything else. I'm just going to go on mute for a sec. Thanks, guys.
Hi everyone, Nathan here. Just to confirm, there's not been any further questions. So what we're going to do is we're going to end the webcast now, and again, our details are on the screen. So if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out, and we'll come back to you with answers. Or if you need a call, we'll jump on one and help you get those orders over the line. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.